The alien scientists had been studying intelligent species for centuries, compiling research on traits they believed indicated true advancement. Loyalty, they concluded, was a trait exclusive to highly developed civilizations. Only those capable of complex reasoning and long-term planning could form bonds beyond instinct. It was an accepted fact, unchallenged across countless research papers and symposiums. Then they met a dog. The research station orbiting a quiet moon had been built for interspecies studies. The scientists' tall, spindly beings with translucent skin and large, unblinking eyes were known to humans as the Vellari. They prided themselves on their rationality, their understanding of biology and behavior across the cosmos. When humans joined their study program, the Vellari were eager to see what insights this peculiar, carbon-based species could provide. Nathan had been part of the research team for 3 months, and the Vellari still struggled to understand him. He was cooperative, intelligent, and surprisingly adaptable. But he also displayed behaviors that confused them: irrational attachments to objects, unnecessary emotional responses, and most perplexingly, his insistence on bringing a non-sentient creature aboard the station. This is Murphy, Nathan had introduced on his first day, gesturing to the medium-sized, scruffy dog at his side. The animal wagged its tail, tongue lolling out in what the Vellari categorized as a non-threatening display. "You have brought livestock," one of the scientists, Realm, asked. "He's not livestock. He's my dog." "You consume it."
"No, he's my friend."
The Vellari took several moments to process this. This animal is incapable of language, abstract reasoning, or technological advancement. "That's correct," Nathan said, scratching Murphy behind the ears. "He's still my friend." The Vellari recorded this statement in silence. It was clear they did not believe it. Over the next few weeks, Murphy's presence on the station remained a curiosity. The Vellari observed the dog's behavior with the same meticulous detail they applied to any new species. They noted how he followed Nathan everywhere, how he responded to his voice, how he seemed to anticipate his moods. "He exhibits conditioned behavior," one scientist noted, "reinforced through training." Nathan sighed. "It's more than that." But the Vellari remained unconvinced. Animals, they argued, acted on instinct. There was no deeper meaning behind Murphy's actions. It was simply a biological response, an automatic attachment to a provider of food and shelter. Then the incident happened. The research station had been built with multiple safety redundancies, but space was unpredictable. A minor meteor impact had gone unnoticed, a fracture forming in one of the outer corridors. The structural integrity held until it didn't. Nathan had been walking back from the observation deck when the warning alarms blared. A sharp hiss of escaping air filled the hallway. The emergency doors slammed shut, but not before the pressure drop sent him sprawling. Murphy, who had been trotting beside him, immediately reacted. The dog's body tensed, ears flattening against his head. The Vellari, watching from the control room, assumed the creature would flee. That would be the logical response. Instead, Murphy ran toward Nathan. The human had managed to brace himself, but the lack of oxygen was already affecting his movements. His breaths came shallow and quick, his vision blurred. He reached for the nearest emergency latch, but his fingers fumbled. Murphy grabbed his sleeve in his teeth and pulled. The Vellari watched in stunned silence as the dog dragged Nathan toward the emergency panel. Nathan, barely conscious, managed to slap the override button. The inner doors sealed, and artificial atmosphere flooded the chamber. By the time the rescue team arrived, Murphy was pressed against Nathan's chest, whining softly, his tail still. The Vellari struggled to process what they had seen. This action was not self-preserving, one finally said. "No," Nathan muttered, still catching his breath. "It wasn't." "Why?" Nathan looked down at Murphy, who was now wagging his tail again, licking his face. He gave the dog a weak pat. "Because he's loyal." The Vellari exchanged glances. "That is not possible," Realm said. "Loyalty requires advanced cognition, moral reasoning, and understanding of." "Maybe your definition is wrong." The Vellari had no immediate answer. They simply recorded the event, knowing their research had encountered something they did not yet understand. The research station's medical bay was a marvel of efficiency. designed to accommodate a variety of species with vastly different physiologies. Nathan sat on the examination table, feeling the sting of antiseptic as one of the Vellari medics, a being named Solvin, tended to the bruising along his ribs. Murphy sat on the floor beside him, watching the alien with wary eyes. The silence stretched between them. The Vellari were rarely quiet during examinations, usually filling the air with observations and data collection. But this time, Solvin seemed preoccupied, his translucent fingers hesitating before applying another cooling gel to Nathan's arm. "You are stable," Solvin finally said. "Thanks," Nathan muttered, flexing his fingers. The numbness was fading, but his muscles still felt sluggish from the oxygen deprivation. Solvin glanced down at Murphy. The dog had not left Nathan's side since the incident. He had growled when the medics had first approached, only relenting after Nathan reassured him. The Vellari had never encountered an animal acting as a guardian before. "We have reviewed the footage several times," Solvin said. "We cannot understand why the creature acted against its own survival interests." Nathan exhaled slowly. He was too tired for another debate about whether Murphy's actions had been instinct or something more. "Because he cares about me," he said simply. Solvin's large, black eyes blinked. "But he does not possess the cognitive framework necessary for such reasoning." Nathan gave a tired chuckle. "Tell Murphy that." Murphy's ears perked up at the sound of his name. His tail gave a single wag, but he remained seated, watching Solvin carefully. The alien scientist seemed to consider this. Would he do so again, knowing the risk? Without question. Solvin's fingers twitched, a Vellari sign of deep thought. This suggests an entirely undocumented form of interspecies bonding. We have observed cooperation between species before, but not at this level of. He hesitated, as if reluctant to use the word. Loyalty. Loyalty. Nathan smirked. "Guess your research needs an update." Solvin did not refute this. Instead, he turned his attention fully to Murphy. "We must conduct further studies." Nathan's smile faded. "He's not a test subject." Solvin tilted his head. "Neither are you, yet we study you." "That's different." "How?" Nathan opened his mouth, then closed it. How could he explain that Murphy wasn't just an animal, but family? That loyalty, real loyalty, didn't need advanced cognition or language. It was something deeper, something beyond logic. Solvin seemed to sense his hesitation. "We will not cause harm," he assured. "We only wish to understand." Nathan sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Fine. But if he gets stressed, we stop." Solvin inclined his head in agreement. The next few days were an exercise in controlled chaos. The Vellari had never studied a non-sentient creature with this level of attention before. They ran behavioral tests, observed interactions, and even attempted rudimentary communication exercises. Murphy, for his part, tolerated it. He followed commands, responded to Nathan's voice, and even allowed the Vellari to examine him, though he drew the line at anything involving unfamiliar machinery, barking sharply when one scientist attempted to scan him with a hovering device. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Krillin had been reviewing data in the laboratory when Nathan entered with Murphy trotting beside him. The dog had already learned the layout of the station, navigating corridors with surprising ease. Krillin barely looked up. "We have compiled the initial findings. The data suggests the creature's actions are a result of prolonged imprinting and..." Murphy sneezed. Krillin froze. Slowly he turned toward the dog, his translucent skin shifting to a faint shade of blue, a Vellari sign of confusion. "What was that?" Nathan raised an eyebrow. "A sneeze." Krillin stared. "It was directed at me." Nathan snorted. "Yeah, probably. He doesn't like what you're saying." Murphy sneezed again, this time stepping forward and shaking his head. Krillin recoiled slightly. "Is this an aggressive display?" Nathan laughed. "No, he's just being dramatic." Krillin's skin darkened further. "Dramatic." Nathan crouched beside Murphy, rubbing his ears. Dogs react to tone, body language. They know when someone's being dismissive. Krillin processed this. He understands social cues. To a degree. Yeah. The Vellari scientist regarded Murphy with newfound scrutiny. Then he is aware of how he is perceived. Nathan considered this. Not in the way we are, but he knows when he's liked. He knows when he's needed. Rillen tapped his fingers against the table, deep in thought. We must reevaluate our parameters. Nathan grinned. Welcome to life with a dog. Murphy, as if sensing the shift in mood, let out a happy bark. The Vellari flinched at the sudden noise, but Nathan only laughed, scratching the dog under his chin. For the first time since the study began, the Vellari did not dismiss what they did not understand. Instead, they watched, listened, and learned. The Vellari were not accustomed to revising their conclusions so quickly. Their research process favored slow, meticulous examination, often spanning decades before a theory was adjusted. Yet Murphy had disrupted their understanding of loyalty in a matter of days. Nathan could see the shift in their approach. Where before they had viewed the dog as an anomaly to be explained, now they observed him with something closer to curiosity, perhaps even respect, if such a thing could be said of beings whose emotional expressions were so subtle. Rilm, in particular, had become deeply invested. He had taken to shadowing Nathan and Murphy during their routines, noting every interaction, every choice the dog made. It was unnerving at times, but Nathan tolerated it. He wanted to see where this led. One evening, though evening was an arbitrary concept on the station, Rillen approached Nathan in the common area, his skin a pale shade that suggested deep concentration. Murphy, sprawled at Nathan's feet, lifted his head as the Vellari scientist settled into a seat across from them. We have been analyzing the footage of the incident in the corridor, Rillen said without preamble. There is a detail that remains unexplained. Nathan leaned back slightly. Go on. Rillen's fingers twitched. Murphy did not hesitate. The moment you were in danger, he acted. There was no calculation, no deliberation. He did not assess his options. That's what loyalty is, Nathan said. Rillen's large black eyes fixed on him. No, that is something else. He hesitated, as if reluctant to voice his thoughts. Among our own, loyalty is a measured decision. It is based on mutual benefit, long-term trust, and careful reasoning. It is cultivated over time. But what Murphy displayed was immediate, automatic. Nathan scratched Murphy's ears, thinking, "You're saying it wasn't just loyalty, it was instinct." Rillen's skin darkened slightly, the Vellari equivalent of reluctant agreement. If that is the case, then we must question the nature of instinct itself. Nathan frowned. I don't follow. Rillen folded his hands together. Instinct, as we define it, is the result of evolutionary pressures. It drives creatures to survive, to preserve their own genetic line. What Murphy did contradicts that. He risked himself for you, without hesitation, even when escape was an option. Nathan exhaled slowly. Yeah, that's what makes dogs special. Rillen shook his head. It is beyond special. It is illogical. Nathan chuckled. Welcome to life with humans. Rillen ignored the comment, his gaze dropping to Murphy. If this behavior is instinctual, then it suggests an evolutionary path we have not accounted for, a path where survival is not solely individual, but shared. A species that prioritizes the well-being of others, even at personal risk. Nathan tilted his head. You're saying Murphy evolved to be this way? In a sense, yes, but not for his own kind. Rillen's fingers tapped against the table. He evolved to protect yours. Nathan blinked. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. The Vellari weren't wrong. Dogs had been selectively bred for generations, shaped by human companionship. Their instincts had been molded by thousands of years of shared existence. They weren't just animals anymore. They were something in between, creatures bound to humanity in a way no other species was. Murphy let out a soft huff and rested his head on Nathan's knee. Rillen watched, his skin shifting to a contemplative hue. This changes things. Nathan raised an eyebrow. How so? If loyalty can be instinctive, Rillen said slowly, then we must reconsider its role in intelligence. Perhaps it is not merely a trait of advanced species, but a foundation for cooperation itself. Nathan whistled low. That's a big shift for you guys. Riln's skin flickered briefly. It is necessary. Nathan looked down at Murphy, who was now dozing, tail twitching slightly in his sleep. He had always known that dogs were remarkable, but seeing the Vellari struggle to comprehend what he took for granted put it in a new light. For the first time, the researchers weren't just studying humanity. They were learning from it. The Vellari prided themselves on their ability to adapt to new information, but Nathan could tell that Murphy had pushed them into unfamiliar territory. The scientists had spent weeks reviewing data, adjusting theories, and debating among themselves about what the dog's behavior meant for their understanding of intelligence and loyalty. But scientific discussions could only take them so far. Eventually they wanted proof. Would he do it again, Riln asked one morning, watching as Murphy lay sprawled across Nathan's bunk, tail thumping lazily. Nathan sighed. We're not testing that. Riln's skin darkened in what Nathan had come to recognize as frustration. We do not intend to place you in actual danger. But if we are to understand, we must see if his response is consistent. Nathan studied Riln. The Vellari weren't cruel. They were methodical. They wouldn't put him at risk, but they wanted controlled conditions to confirm what they had witnessed. Nathan glanced down at Murphy. The dog lifted his head, blinking up at him with sleepy brown eyes. You want to see if he'll react the same way, Nathan said. Yes. Nathan hesitated. He didn't doubt Murphy would respond if he thought something was wrong, but deliberately triggering that response felt manipulative. Still, the Vellari were struggling to grasp something that was second nature to humans. Maybe they needed this. Fine, Nathan said. But I get final say on how far this goes. Riln agreed without hesitation. The test was simple. Nathan would enter a controlled environment where the Vellari would simulate distress signals. No real danger, just enough to see how Murphy reacted. Nathan stood in the designated chamber, a sterile white room with smooth walls and embedded sensors. Murphy sat at his feet, ears perked but relaxed. We will now begin. Riln's voice came through the intercom. The first test was mild. A low, artificial hum filled the room, mimicking the emergency alerts of the station. Nathan tensed slightly, but Murphy only tilted his head. No reaction. Riln adjusted the parameters. The hum became a sharp, pulsing sound closer to the real alarm that had blared during the corridor breach. Nathan inhaled slowly. Beside him, Murphy's ears flicked up. His posture straightened. Then the final test. The room's lighting flickered, and a faint vibration ran through the floor, simulating structural instability. Nathan swayed slightly, keeping his breathing even. Murphy did not hesitate. The dog moved in front of Nathan, his body low, muscles tensed, his tail, usually loose and wagging, stiffened. His eyes darted around the room, searching for a threat he couldn't see. Nathan reached down instinctively, placing a hand on Murphy's back. The dog didn't flinch, but the tension in his body remained. He was ready to act. Riln's voice crackled through the speaker. Fascinating. Nathan exhaled, rubbing Murphy's side. Yeah. The simulation ended. The light stabilized, the alarms faded, and the vibration stopped. Murphy remained alert for several moments before finally relaxing, though his tail remained low. Nathan crouched beside him, scratching behind his ears. It's okay, bud. Just a test. Murphy huffed but leaned into the touch. Riln entered the chamber moments later, datapad in hand. His skin had taken on a flickering hue, a sign of deep contemplation. His response was immediate. Told you, Nathan said. Riln crouched, observing Murphy closely. He does not know the danger is false.
Nope.
And yet, he reacts the same way as before. Nathan nodded. Because he doesn't take chances. Riln's fingers twitched. This is not a calculated decision. It is instinct, but it is also trust. He believes you are vulnerable, and so he acts. Nathan smiled faintly. Yeah, that's what makes it special. Riln stood, his posture unusually rigid. We must rethink our approach. Nathan arched an eyebrow. What do you mean? The Vellari scientist hesitated, something rare for his kind. We have always assumed loyalty was a product of higher reasoning, a choice made by those capable of understanding consequence. but Murphy's actions suggest something different. That trust, that bond, can exist without advanced cognition. Nathan straightened. You're saying loyalty isn't just a trait of intelligence. Rillen's skin darkened. It may be something more fundamental. A survival mechanism beyond self-preservation. Nathan looked down at Murphy, who was now lying down, head resting on his paws, watching them both. Rillen turned to leave. We will need time to analyze this. Nathan chuckled. Take all the time you need. Murphy's not going anywhere. As Rillen departed, Nathan sat beside Murphy, scratching his fur absent-mindedly. The Vellari had spent centuries studying intelligence, but they had only just begun to understand something humans had known all along. Loyalty wasn't just about logic, it was about heart. The research station had returned to its usual rhythm, though a subtle shift had settled over the Vellari scientists. Nathan noticed it in the way they moved, the way they spoke, even the way they observed him and Murphy. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was something deeper. They were trying to understand not just Murphy, but what his existence meant for their understanding of cooperation, trust, and instinct. Nathan hadn't expected the change to be so profound. He had assumed they would document their findings, adjust a few theories, and move on. But the Vellari didn't operate that way. They pursued knowledge to its absolute conclusion, and Murphy had given them a puzzle they couldn't ignore. Rillen, in particular, had become increasingly thoughtful. He no longer simply observed. He engaged. He asked questions not just about Murphy's behavior, but about human relationships in general. One afternoon, Nathan found himself sitting in the station's common area while Murphy dozed beside him. Rillen stood nearby, his skin shifting between pale blues and purples, a sign of deep contemplation. You call him your companion, Rillen said eventually. Nathan nodded. Yeah, but he does not speak. He does not reason as you do. No. And yet you trust him. Nathan smiled faintly, more than most people. Rillen was silent for a moment. This concept is difficult for us. Nathan leaned back. Figured as much. Rillen's fingers twitched. Among the Vellari, trust is built upon demonstrated reliability and mutual benefit. It is a process, not an assumption. Nathan glanced down at Murphy. Trust isn't always about logic. Sometimes it's about knowing, deep down, that someone will be there when you need them. Rillen considered this. A form of certainty beyond evidence. Nathan chuckled. Something like that. Rillen hesitated, then sat across from him. Would he trust another as he trusts you? Nathan thought for a moment. Depends. Trust is built over time, even with dogs, but once they give it, it's real. Rillen's skin flickered slightly. May I test this? Nathan raised an eyebrow. How? Rillen didn't answer immediately. Instead, he extended a hand toward Murphy, who opened one eye and observed him cautiously. Nathan watched as Rillen remained still, waiting. Murphy sniffed the air but didn't move. Slowly, Rillen reached into a small pouch attached to his belt and pulled out a small, unfamiliar object. It was a simple band of woven material, thin and flexible. What is that? Nathan asked. A symbol, Rillen said. Among my people, it is used to signify trust between individuals during formal agreements. Nathan frowned. And you want to give it to Murphy? Rillen nodded. If he accepts it, it will be the first instance of such a bond between a Vellari and a non-Vellari. Nathan wasn't sure how much Murphy would understand, but he gestured for Rillen to proceed. Rillen placed the band on the floor a few inches from Murphy's paws and withdrew his hand. Murphy lifted his head, sniffed the object, then looked up at Rillen. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, in a slow, deliberate motion, Murphy placed one paw over the band and let out a soft huff. Rillen's skin darkened in surprise. He acknowledges it. Nathan grinned. Looks like you just made a friend. Rillen stared at Murphy, then at the band under his paw. This was not the outcome I anticipated. Nathan chuckled. Welcome to life with a dog. Rillen remained silent, then slowly stood. We have much to reconsider. Nathan watched as the Vellari scientist left, his posture unusually rigid. Murphy, satisfied that the exchange was over, settled back down with a sigh. Nathan reached down, scratching behind his ears. "You just changed an entire species philosophy, buddy." Murphy wagged his tail once, then promptly fell asleep. The Vellari had come searching for answers about intelligence and loyalty. What they had found was something they hadn't expected, a truth that existed beyond logic, beyond reason. A truth that only a dog could teach.